Are we live? Are we live? I think we are live. Yes, we're live.
Hooray!
How are you, Jerry?
Hey, Warren.
Well, this is good. I literally just sat down. We were filming, for the Academy members, we were filming the Feedback Friday. So what we do is we listen to a whole wealth of mixes that all the Academy members do, and we critique them, and it's fantastic. Hello, Brian, Justin, Leopold, Tom, CBDS, Ted, Ron, Adam, Mark, Lemica, David, Plaid Cow, Alex, Michael, Ken, Cliff, Kenneth. It's alive! It's alive! Gordon's alive! Anybody know that reference? Gordon's alive! I was wearing my Flash t-shirt yesterday. Leopold, Peter, Dwayne, Ron, Darko, Zach. Hello, everybody. Please, as ever, if you can hit that like button, that would be amazing. And subscribe, and if you haven't already subscribed, and all the good things that we love would be really, really good. So, for those of you that are Academy members, you'll know that we did this yesterday inside of the Academy. And what is great about this is we're going to do the same giveaway. Is that correct?
We are. We're going to give away 5 copies of Volume 3 of the Beatles Recording Reference Manuals. Can't beat that.
And we're going to do this live. Is that correct? Is Matt watching?
No. This one is a rafflecopter.
Oh, this one's a rafflecopter. Okay, cool. So
share on your social media.
Share on your social media. If there should be a link somewhere below the video. So thank you, Mark, who's lifetime subscribed. That's fantastic. Diego. So hit the like button on here, share away, and underneath this video down there somewhere, you can click to enter. And yes, it's going to be, you're going to get a chance of 1 of 5 books. This is Volume 3. Yes, and it's going to be signed by young Gerald. Jerry's going to sign it.
I appreciate the young reference every time you bring it up.
It's okay. I think it's like I was talking about yesterday. It's your new, very nice aerodynamic haircut.
That's got to be it.
That's what we used to say at school whenever anybody would get like a really, really like short kind of designed haircut. They go, very aerodynamic. So, you know, if they're like cycling in the Tour de France or something like that, like yourself, you know.
Yeah, it helps you run away from people. So that's not bad.
There you go. Matt's put it up there. Enter to win 1 of 5 copies here. So if you see that, yes, Justin, you get another chance to win it. And Sheila's already won it. Didn't you already win? You won one yesterday, didn't you, Sheila? Hello in Zambia. Hello in Quebec. Hello from Ibiza. Well, we're not going to feel bad for you in Ibiza. That sounds absolutely beautiful. And Diego says he was going to say that Jerry's looking very fresh today.
Well, we'll see how my voice does. I can't imagine how your voice holds out.
The new music camera says, why is the live sound on YouTube always poor? Music engineering guys. I think that's supposed to be him trolling us, saying, you know, because we're music engineers, it should sound better. Well, unfortunately, it's YouTube. There's not much we can do. And we're doing 2 Skype conversations. So I'm Skyping with him, and then it's being fed into YouTube and then fed to you. So if you don't like it, you can please feel free to go. I mean, really, it's a Skype. It's not. We're not doing a live mix here.
No, we're not.
God bless it. Yeah. All righty, but troll away. All right. This is a conversation. All right, so everybody, hello Delvin, hello Darren, hello Tom, hello Thug Life Talent, hello James, Paul Smith, Diego, Thomas. Thank you everybody here. We have an amazingly. Lemica says blame YouTube. That's what I do. No, we're dealing with two sets of Skype and YouTube. There's not a lot you can do with that really. You know what I mean? What do you ask? Like any new or old mics? Did any new? I'm not sure what you mean, Justin. Adam Patchton, honored to be live with you guys. Thank you, Maskoff. Did I high pass Skype? Yeah, we must have. Yes, Sheila said she won yesterday. She's sitting this one out. Would like to have my book signed, though. Oh, okay. Well, what we should do, it will be signed.
It will be signed.
What we should do, Matt, is we should do some giveaways anyway, because we love finding out. We should do 3 giveaways. Maybe we can do. What do you want to do, Matt? Text me with an idea. All right, we'll do giveaways during it. So please hit that like button and share if you can. And then underneath there is a link to win Jerry's book. All right, Jerry. This is book number 3 in the series.
It's book number 3. So far, book number 1 got you from 1961 to 64. So that took you from My Bonnie to the Beatles for Sale. Book number 2 covered 65 and 66. So that took you from Help through Revolver. And now we're picking up the story with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour, which is what's covered in volume 3.
Wonderful. So it starts with
Strawberry
Fields Forever. That's right.
Yep, late 1966. So December of 66 was the start of the sessions for Pepper. Before they broke for Christmas, they began work on Strawberry Fields, When I'm 64, and Penny Lane. 2 of those tracks became their next single, and When I'm 64 lived long enough to end up on Pepper at the end of things.
Very nice. And how long did it take them to record this?
Well, Strawberry Fields, let me just jump to that. Strawberry Fields, they were working on that recording from November 24th, 1966, all the way through November 7th, 1967. So they did work on it all through that period. And that's for all of the versions that they worked on. The core work was over the course of a month. And they did 35 days with Strawberry Fields Forever in 12 different recording sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of work.
A lot of work. Now, what about the first song, though? What about Strawberry Fields? How long was that actual recording process?
Yeah, no, that was Strawberry Fields. 35 days, 12 sessions.
35 days, 12 sessions. Yeah. And yesterday you were telling us that it is an edit between takes 3 and 4. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the song, there were 4 versions of the song that were recorded. The first 2 didn't live up to, didn't come up to snuff. They were like feeling their way through it. By the 3rd version of it, they had their arrangement down, and they knew what they wanted to do with it. So the release version that we hear is the front end of the release version is the 3rd version of the song. The back end of the song, which is actually the majority of the song, almost 2/3 of it, where you have a sea of percussion that comes into the track. That is the 4th version of the song.
Right.
And famously, those 2 different versions were recorded at 2 different tape speeds, or not tape speeds, but recorded at 2 different tempos, and two different keys. And after they were done, and they were trying to decide between them, which is the one that we like the best to release, Lennon came to George Martin and said, well, I like aspects of both. I like the front end of version 3, and I like the back end of version 4. Can't you just bring those together? And George Martin, said to Lennon, well, John, these are, they're in different keys, they're at different tempos. And he's like, yeah, you can fix it. And miraculously, through the use of variable speed on the tape machines, they were able to create mixes that they were able to relatively slow down one take, relatively speed up the other, and as they did that, they were able to get very close in key to each other, and that made it possible to make John's dream come true on that track.
That's rather. Which is, now somebody yesterday said they identified it at 1 minute and 3 seconds or something.
Something like that.
It's where you were saying it's where the big drum fill comes in. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's where you hear the beginning of that the cacophony of percussion that comes in. The front end of the song is a very straightforward rock and roll groove. Sorry, I'm a little bit slower on my keyboard here today. So the top half of the song is I'm getting to the breakdown. A lot of pages is 3 mellotrons, drums, maracas, bass, and vocals. And now when you get to the second, and so that's version 3. Version 4, there are 2 drum sets. There's some reverse drumming. There's bongos, finger cymbals, gourd, timpani, tambourine, and maracas. So it's a big mess of percussion that's going on. All that was tracked to 1 channel. And that's the point of the edit.
Fantastic. I mean, that's... I haven't, since you told me about that yesterday, I haven't gone back and listened to the song. I've been so slam busy. But now reiterating it, reminding me, I'm going to go back and check that out. That's pretty darn remarkable. Yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about the process and reiterating that this was done on a 4-track and not on an 8-track. And you said, when did 8-tracks come in for them?
They didn't start working on 8-track until about the middle of the White Album, and the first song recorded to 8-track was the Hey Jude single, which was recorded or started at Trident. Actually started and completed at Trident. There's a cool story around that if you want to take that tangent.
Please. Hey Jude's one of my favorite songs, so feel free. And it was you that taught me that Hey Jude was sung with a 67 and not a 47.
Yeah, there you go. Recorded at Trident. Trident was a newer studio. It had the bells and whistles of 8-track, which made the Beatles happy. It was a hip space. The engineers didn't wear suits. It lined up with the Beatles, sensibility. And so they track Hey Jude there. They mix Hey Jude at Trident, and they're loving it. They're playing it loud at the end of the night. This is killer. This is better than anything we can do at EMI. They take it back to EMI and put it through the Altex, the 601s that are balanced and meticulously balanced. And all of a sudden, there's the song sounds horrible.
Really?
Song sounds horrible. Why? Because in order for things to sound good at Trident, they hadn't yet tuned their monitors. So they had a hyper high end on them. They were, I think, they're tannoys at Trident, and a hyper high end on them. So it comes back to a neutral monitoring environment, and it's all out of whack. Well, they had another problem. They had another problem now. The tape standard for the Ampex at Trident was different than the tape standard for the Studer at EMI. The biases were different, so they could not just take the tape and remix it at EMI. So they took the Trident master, stereo master, and they just re-EQ'd the thing from top to bottom using the curve bender EQ, and that's what you hear. So there was
so the curve bender. Wow.
The curve bender.
Oh, which is a beautiful device, and I've had to. I don't actually have one, but I've got to play with it. I know, obviously, Chandler make a full-blown reissue of it. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Diego's asking if it's me commenting. Yes, it is. I'm commenting. Look at that. Because I'm chatting as well here. I'm multitasking. So how much was able to be rescued from that session, or was it entirely a session?
Well, that song was the session. So
they didn't do any other overdubs anywhere else. They just mixed it.
They just mixed it back. They remixed it at EMI. They couldn't do anything else with it. Now, they had started the song actually at EMI. The versions that they were working on there, though, didn't make the cut. And when it was time to when they wanted to track it again, I think EMI was not available, and so they ended up over at Trident to do the session. did a finished version of the song there, and again bring it back to EMI, and it's a mess. For people who don't know, the audio standards at EMI and now Abbey Road have always been like the platinum standard.
Right.
They are serious about good sound, and they've been serious about good sound since the 30s. So, right. So they knew what they were doing. And if a mastering engineer at EMI tells you your song sounds like crap, it's best to believe them.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Yeah, and so so the only thing that happened with that song at EMI was it was completely remixed or not remixed, but completely re-EQ'd from the mix master.
Right. So what's interesting, so I'm just going to sort of clarify this. So they go to Trident, they record Hey Jude from scratch. There's a problem with the room. The monitors are overly EQ'd, and the tape machines aren't biased, quote unquote, properly. So they then go back to EMI. They have to re-EQ it in order to mix it from an 8-track. But how did they do that if EMI didn't have an 8-track?
Not remixed from the 8-track. They did a stereo mix at Trident. That right. Stereo mix was what they worked on at EMI. That's what they worked from. Was the twin track, the stereo 1/4 inch. That's what they.
Here's the interesting thing, and I'm sure maybe a lot of people are thinking this. Hey Jude is one of their best sounding songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder. I mean, look, I understand. I know a curve bender. I've used it quite a few times. It's a great EQ, but it couldn't rescue an unbelievably badly recorded mix.
No. So again, it's the problem with the mix wasn't in like the balance of elements or any of those sorts of things. The problem with the mix was its representative EQ balance across the spectrum to be able to be cut into a listenable record. That was it.
Right.
It wouldn't have been able to go through the cutting process as it was delivered to EMI for whatever reason, boominess or harshness in the mid range. Something was going on with it that when they heard it, they were like, "This isn't what we heard at Trident. This isn't the thing that we were slobbering over when we were there."
So Blue Matrix just said to me, "Say Jude, Hey Jude was one of the best sounding songs!" Exclamation! Relative to what? Well, Blue Matrix, just to be pretty literal with you, I would say now, like I've heard this from Nigel Godrich, I've heard this from pretty much every engineer I know says that Hey Jude vocal sound is one of the best vocal sounds ever recorded. So you don't have to take we listen to that and you hear that Hey Jude and it just grabs you. Now it may not do that for you and you may not consider it to be a very good recording, but I'm just telling you that most of the guys I work with, we put that on and we go, we want that vocal sound. So that's the reason why I'm sort of pushing Jerry on it, because I really want to know, it's like, what they were doing. And because, those of us that maybe we don't agree with you, but those of us that do love that vocal sound, that hold it in such high regard, would want to know why, and the piano sounds great and interesting. So, I suppose it just goes to prove we don't all hear things the same. I mean, to most of us, Hey Jude is a masterpiece of recording. So it's very, very, very interesting to hear, that it had to be fixed so much.
Yeah. So they spent a day re-EQing it. Which the context of the work that was done on Beatles mixes, typically they were relatively quick to come up to a mix. And here they're only, they're working from a stereo, from two tracks, right? So a relatively, a pretty serious amount of time to re-equalize the mix. But I'm sure you've been there where you've got some mud in what is otherwise a good recording, and by a little surgery,
Right.
all the goodness comes back to it, and all the things that you thought you hated about it can go disappear into the background. Essentially,
Right.
think of it that way, as opposed to being like a remix, or that they were starting with bad recordings. They weren't. They were starting with good recordings that were just mis-EQ'd.
Right. Okay. I saw.
And this was the only way around it. And it was because the Trident was using U.S. machines that had a different. They had a different. My terminology may be wrong, but there was something to do with the. I think it was the response of the tape biases that they could use with that machine was not compatible with the machines at EMI. European versus American, in terms of dialing the machine in and neutralizing the machine. And so that was the problem. They just didn't directly convert. They couldn't just take the tape off one, throw it on the other, and remix it. Right.
So it's interesting. So there's a little bit of a discussion going on with the Hey Jude thing. It is interesting that for many of us engineers and producers and mixers, we reference that vocal sound specifically. Obviously, Brian doesn't agree. Is it Brian? Can't remember. Blue Matrix. Doesn't agree, but I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, I think for me, I know, because after you told me that you used a 67 rather than a 47, I actually went to Dave Jordan, who was a big 47 user, a big 67 user, and was like, oh, I want to get myself a 67 because, I'm still after that super warm vocal sound, which I always assumed was a 47 or a 48. And he's like telling me, no, it's a 67. We all knew that. So I was sort of living in that minority of not really, it is one of those things,
Well, do you think there's lots of good reasons why it was a 67? Trident is a new studio starting up. The 47s, they were there, but they were hard to come by. The 67s were easier to get, cheaper at the time. Right. If you're just starting out in a studio, unless you've got a big wallet in your back pocket, you tend to make economic decisions. So they had lots of 67s.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we'll move on from that song and the informed opinions of everybody listening. And so let's go back in time, back to the chronological order of your book. So Strawberry Fields Forever, what was the next song that they recorded?
When I'm 64 was the next track that they worked on.
Oh, wow.
And work on that started in December and ended in April of, so December 66 ended in April of 67. Much more straightforward tune. Not nearly the complicated affair that Strawberry Fields was. A really straightforward backing track of guitar, bass, and drums.
Right.
Overdubs of piano, snare, and vocal. Right. They overdubbed a double tracking of vocal and then backing vocals and chimes, and then they'd run out of tape, and so they knew that they wanted to have some clarinet on the track, so they were forced into a tape reduction remix. And for those who haven't heard me talk about this stuff before, what a tape reduction remix is you've got two tape machines, and the machine one with the work to date is full. And now I'm sending those 4 tracks over to an empty 4-track on another machine. And in that process, I'm making all my decisions of balancing, compression, limiting, equalization, chambers or plates that I might want to apply, artificial double tracking if I want to do anything like that, any sort of effects. I'm committing to them right now as I'm moving them over, because what I'm doing is I'm blending now. I'm summing some of those tracks
Wow.
open up room for on that machine. In this case, they only had to open up one track, but they ended up summing the guitar, bass, drums, and piano to one channel.
Right.
They summed the snare, backing vocals, and chimes to another channel, and then the two lead vocal parts, the double lead vocal, they summed it to a third track, and that left them an open track. That left them an open track for clarinet then.
Oh yes, I remember you talking about this. That's absolutely insane. With that a limited amount of tracks, that they're sitting there and contemplating how much room they're going to leave for it. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, you worked on tape. You worked where you're.
I still do occasionally. I still have an A80, which is. There it is. It's in the shop, kind of. It's got a plastic cover on it. At the moment, the mandolin sitting on it, but it's. So
you do internal bounces, internal summing, right?
Yeah, all the time.
And so part of that process that the engineers along with the producer have to always be keeping in mind as they're building up the track is how we're gonna combine these tracks in order to open up another one, because you want discrete control over some elements going forward, and if you do this reduction or the summing incorrectly, you lose that control. So in this case, they basically gave themselves a backing track on one channel and mixed it like it's the backing track now. They isolated their vocals so they could work on them, and then the occasional parts that were separated by time, the snare, backing vocals, and chimes that weren't contiguous, those went onto a single channel. So those are decisions that they had to make, in advance as they're moving along through the process. It's a level of complexity that we mercifully don't have to deal with when we're working in the digital world, because we've got more tracks than is healthy to be able to utilize.
Yeah, no, I mean it's absolutely insane. I mean, the fact that they didn't get to 8-track until 67.
68
sorry, 68. I don't know why I said 67. I've got too many U47s, U67s, U48s. I wouldn't be surprised if I say 48 in a second. No, the fact they didn't get it until 68 is pretty insane. We were talking about this yesterday with Tom Dowd coming over to England in the late 60s and being blown away that most of the studios he went to work in still had 4 tracks, where America had them for a year or two.
Yeah. A lot of people think of in '68, they think of the White Album as like, the move to 8 or like the 8-track album, but the majority of the White Album is 4-track. I think 20 something tracks out of 33 are 4-track or were started on the 4-track. I think only 10 tracks ended up on the 8-track out of 33 tracks on the White Album, 36 in the air. Yeah, so I mean, the real move to 8-track is actually with Let It Be and Abbey Road. That's the move.
Wow. And Let It Be I love that album. Obviously, Abbey Road is considered to be a masterpiece and is a masterpiece. But as we were talking about yesterday, Let It Be, to me, it's my favorite Beatles album. It's the most I can play along with it. I get it. It has a rock sensibility to it. It has an edge to it that I absolutely love. And it reminds me of, because obviously they didn't play live after 66, it reminds me of what it would be like to hear the Beatles live, but playing more modern sounding songs, more raw sounding rock songs. It's a shame, as we know, that they didn't get to keep making records and see how they would have grown from there. I mean, Abbey Road is such a masterpiece on production, but Abbey Road isn't in your third book, is it? No,
you'll have to wait till Volume 4. You got about a year to wait.
A year to wait on that one. So let's keep going back.
It's a big book.
So When I'm 64 is the second song in the order in your third book. You said to me yesterday that you would describe that as being a more straightforward recording compared with some of the more experimental stuff.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's essentially Yeah, it's essentially a simple rock recording and with room for clarinets. It's pretty straightforward track. Especially when you compare it to what bookended it, which was Strawberry Fields Forever, and then on the backside of it, Penny Lane got started at the end of December. So right before the new year, December 29th, they started on Penny Lane, and that's another horrendously complicated recording. For utilizing the 4-track. Something that came up yesterday that I needed reminding of was there's no tape tricks other than tape reductions going on with Penny Lane. There's no like vari speed or those sorts of things going on with it. It's from the recording point of view, it's a straight 4-track and tape reduction piece. But they ended up doing, let me see here, they ended up with two tape reductions on that to make room for everything that they wanted to do. Right from the top, it actually started off because McCartney's got the backing track. He did a piano part, and then he did 2 other piano parts and a harmonium part. One of the piano parts had tambourine on it. One of them had drums and tambourine on it. And so right from the top, just to get the pianos on, the 3 pianos and some percussion, he needed now to make more room. So those all got summed or reduced to a single track now on tape 2 to open up 3 tracks for additional work. Right from the top, he'd filled up the tape with just pianos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Somebody here was saying in church back in the day, they were preaching about number 9 having backwards tape stuff on it, which is I know I'm going off on it's hard to believe that anything now like the Beatles could be considered, but I suppose there was so much power in those days that these artists had, being so successful and having such a huge following that people were threatened by it. It's just hard to see in now in context of the modern era we live in, just how influential artists like the Beatles were.
Yeah, they pop music in the 60s began to have a deeper resonance than just pop music. And maybe that's with the development of the critical press that came around it, of rock critics and things that came in, that kind of promoted the significance of this music to culture in relationship to culture.
Yeah.
And certainly that when these are no longer just friendly pop songs that you hear on the radio, but we start to hear from these artists in relation to what's going on in the world, and I mean it still happens periodically in the early days of rap, where in pop music it certainly happened and hip hop, where there were political statements being sent through the music, but here in the 60s, when the Beatles are coming into their mature period, this is the first time that crossover has been made in popular culture, where these songs might mean something more than just songs to sing, and yeah, that's that becomes a threat for sure. So
crazy. Yeah, it's obviously that we didn't have social media, we didn't have the thing. So speaking of which, so Matt says let's give away the mixing classic rock course that I did. So we're going to give that away.
Oh, that's a good one.
So with that, what do we want to know about our audience here, young Jerry? What about I know you like it when I call you young Jerry.
I'll take it.
Let me see. I think. All right. For those of you, for those of you that are Beatles fans, they don't have to be your favorite band, but what is your favorite Beatles song? What is your favorite Beatles song? And this is to win my classic rock mixing course. And I believe in that course, I only mix using stock plugins, or I only mix in the box. So that's quite a good one. So what is your favorite Beatles song? Tell us what your favorite Beatles song is. SJ, English humor that was taken the wrong way. I'm not sure, Cliff, what your joke was. Revolution number 9 says not hardly. Penny Lane. We're about to talk about Penny Lane. Don't Let Me Down. That's one of my favorite.
Great tune. You know that lick.
Then live.
I'm waiting for the lick, Warren.
Oh, it's... Don't let me down. Don't let me down.
That's a F sharp minor to E for you people that are following him.
Yeah. Just like that. Yeah, just such a great song.
Bum, 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 bum. Great.
Day in the Life, Old Brown Shoe.
Oh, Old Brown
What
Shoe.
I like about the vocals in Don't Let Me Down, they're just passionate. They sound amazing. I think the reason why, universally engineers and producers love the Hey Jude vocal is, A, it's a great vocal, as in like performance. Of course it is, but the tone at the beginning is so warm and so inviting that we've so many engineers and producers, pretty much everybody I know chases that sound. They want that feeling. They want to be able to just like put on a vocal that feels that fat and that warm. That's why I mistakenly always assumed it was a U47 or a U48, only to be told that it was a U67. And now it sounds like the curve bender was part of that process to kind of like add some air to it as well. So now you got me all thinking. Now I've got to get a 67. What was the console at Trident on for that? Quick, do you remember?
I'm actually going to look that up for you.
Please.
Give me just a quick second.
Oh, I see, Cliff. Well, I think the "Don't Let Me Down" vocal was that sung on a dynamic. If it was live, it was outside, wasn't it?
Yeah, actually.
I know I'm jumping.
Those vocals were done on an AKG C30A, which was a television microphone. Yeah. That's crazy.
So there's the big hey Sparky. So there's the big difference.
All right, I'm almost there. Just a second here.
So yeah, I'd be intrigued to see what the console was.
Okay, here we go. Trident. Sorry about this. I'm operating on a touchpad here.
Yes, somebody said Jude was originally Hey Jules. It was written for Julian Lennon.
Okay, the console was a Sound Techniques 20x8.
So is the Sound Techniques. Oh my God, they're selling those again. Oh, this is insane.
Okay, so, and here you go. You ready? Here's your formula, Warren. Okay?
Okay, all right, everybody. This is getting crazy.
Why not?
Hold on one second.
Okay,
Hold on one second. I'm going to get...
Take notes. Take notes, and all secrets will be revealed.
Brad being an acoustic, and in his honor, seeing Scott Baxendale is online. I'm picking up his harmony and K conversion guitar. Oh. Wow, so it's beautiful. You're gonna love one, Jerry. You're gonna love it.
Okay, so Sound Techniques board. It's a 20x8 board.
Right. 20.
Yeah, 20 in by 8 out. The tape machine was a 1-inch AKG 440.
AKG.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize. Ampeg 440.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
Yeah, old eyes. Ampeg 440. So we've got just a moment here.
I am writing it down. That's a good point. Well, I can get it back from Jerry.
Yeah, you can. You can actually. So the equalizer that they used was an Astronix A1671.
Is that a Trident, or is that at Abbey Road?
This is a Trident, so this is all Trident stuff, okay? A Pultec equalizer. You've got a couple of them right back there. They used LA2A compressors. So Teltronics LA2As was the compressor for it.
Right. So an Ampex 1-inch tape machine.
Ampex 1-inch 8-track.
Yeah.
Okay. Astronix A1671 EQ. Pultec.
Don't know that.
Pultec EPQ 1A.
What were they using the Pultec on?
This is their entire rig. This is their outboard gear. Okay.
It's their entire outboard gear. Oh wow.
Okay, so the Pultec EPQ 1A, that could have been in play easily on this. Their compressors were Teltronics LA2As and Universal Audio 175Bs. And they had 1176s, the UREI 1176s.
Oh, they had 1176s as well. It's probably why to me, it's the first modern sounding Beatles song. It's the first song that sounds modern. So they were getting away from, because the LA2As are probably indicative of some of the older sounding, compressors with really, really slow attack and release times. But the 1176, that's a fast attack and release time.
Yeah, really fast, and
especially for the time.
Yeah, so I mean that, and the difference being you can dial it in a little bit. I mean it's all fast relatively, but you can still dial it in. You can dial it in a way that the LA2As don't let you quite have the control over. With the other thing to keep in mind, I guess, if you're chasing this, is they didn't stack compressors, right? They didn't. Yeah. They didn't stack them. They were too. They're all these studios, like even with your hardware, you're limited to your two Pultecs. You have to decide how you're going to use those. You're limited to, however many distressors you have, however many 1176s you have, however many of the 126 compressors that you've got. So across their recording, they had to allocate those. So they aren't doing things that we're able to do with software of stacking or having multiple instances of these things. So it's going to likely be, the chain's likely going to be one of those EQs, one of those compressors in conjunction with the U67 to get you your sound.
Wow. That's so cool to hear. It's so cool to hear. Not hardly. Oh, you wanted 1173. I'm sure there'll be a link for that as well. It's not a single. Is it a single, the Disturbed tune? I mean, it'd be exciting if it is. I'm being people are. So it'd be nice if it was. It would be nice if it put it out as a single. All right, so let's go backwards and forwards like we've been doing. All my fault, of course, because I wanted to know the secret of the Hey Jude vocal sound that so many of us covered. Now, obviously, we're never going to take anything away from the fact that it's an amazing song and it's an incredible vocal, but this tone itself has always eluded me and has always been something that so many of us chase. So it's nice to know the details. Okay, so Story Feels Forever, When I'm 64 was the next. Penny Lane, is that correct?
Yeah, Penny Lane we're into now. The last song started in '66, and Again, a very complicated recording. Before we ventured off into Hey Jude land, we were at their first tape production with that. So again, there were 3 different piano parts that were summed to a single part to open up onto a new tape to open up 3 tracks for additional work on that song, and that ended up being filled with. Let me get here. That ended up being filled with bass, vocals, backing vocals, drums, guitar, and congas. So that was the
guitar and congas.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go back and listen to it.
It's there. It's all there. Yeah. So the bass got its own track.
Right.
Vocals and backing vocals were sung together, and then drums, a guitar, and a conga part were recorded together.
Wow. Fantastic.
And now that was a point now where we're summing things again because we've run out of tape again. We've used up the four tracks, and at this point now, we once again they and this was pretty common. They collapsed almost the entire backing track. Well, in fact, they did. They collapsed the entire backing track to a single channel of tape, single
God
track
bless
of tape. And now people out there might be, well, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And the answer is mono. They were, this was going to be a single, and they were working toward mono, which was their release format there. And also, still at this time, mono was the UK market's preferred release format. So everything they were doing was to serve mono.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, even though when I was a kid, it was the 70s and the early 80s. But even then, we didn't. Yeah, by the time the late 80s hit, people had stereo boomboxes. But when I was a kid, we listened on AM radios. Yeah. So what's the point of mixing a single in stereo if it's going to go? 99% of the people that are going to listen to it are going to hear it on an AM radio. I mean, I remember going to like workplaces when I was a kid, and there would be like a little radio set that was this rectangular size, about that size, and it had one big speaker in it, and across the top was the FM dial. So even the FM radios had one speaker. It was the 80s that brought in the sort of boombox, the stereo boombox, and it got kind of crazy. But the reality was, for most people, and there's also this sort of thing we forget, just because something's the latest and greatest doesn't mean that everybody uses it. It doesn't just mean that, there's an Android, phone comes out that everybody in the planet throws their old Android away, for instance, and goes out and buys the latest one the next day. It was a big criticism, I think, in technologies, that when people always design things for the latest and greatest, that's great. But 99% of people aren't always buying the latest thing at all times. So it makes sense, yeah. As not hardly saying, you sell to your audience.
Yeah, and for sure. And they were, even though, obviously at this point, the Beatles are an international act. They're still, they're still also an English act, and
right.
They're an English act first, and
right.
and first and foremost. And so they thought about the work that they did in relation to their first market that they did. Even though the U.S. was their largest market, the UK was their first market. So that's what they thought about in this work. So yeah, the whole backing track. So 3 pianos, 2 tambourines, drums, harmonium, bass, guitars, and congas are all collapsed to a single track of audio now at this point in the recording, in order to make room for more work. And the additional work that happened was yet another piano part.
Right.
And and some backing vocals that were on the two open tracks. The original vocals were kept together. Vocals and backing vocals were summed together because they had taken up individual tracks. So vocals and backing vocals on one, the entire backing track on another. I've opened up 2 tracks of audio now on the 4-track. I fill that with piano and with additional backing vocals. And you'd think they're done, but they're not. They're
right,
because we've still got some orchestral work. We've got flugelhorn, piccolo, trumpets and flutes to go on.
Wow.
We've still got more backing vocals. We've still got the chimes and when the fireman rushes in bell to add to it. So
wow.
There's work upon work upon work upon work that's going on here. The final track of this, I'll do a quick count here. So across 4 tracks, there's 27 performances across 4 tracks
right.
to make that song.
Right.
That's
insane.
That's how complicated that is. Yeah, and now put yourself in the producer's shoes, the engineer's shoes, to have your artist coming to you with these dreams, and
right.
you have the limitations of your and the restrictions of your technology, which all of us have, one way or another. All of us have. Even in your situation, Warren. You've
right.
got access to great studios, but those studios have their allocation of hardware. They have their particular mixing console that you're working through. You were in Sunset the other day, I think in the Prince room, and that's an old console. That's late 60s, early 70s. We believe it was early 70s. Couldn't quite figure out the day because it is the predecessor to the console that's in Studio One. It's got the Media mic pre's in it, which is like Jensen Transformers. But yeah, I think early 70s is a pretty accurate guess. Jeff didn't remember. He said late 60s, early 70s. I think it's early 70s from what Craig had told me. So that board's got what 3 EQs built into each channel, or what did it? No,
it's got API EQs. I mean, they basically took API EQs and put it in, and you could obviously swap those out as well. So that's pretty remarkable. Yeah, it has you could put 550s, 560s, whatever you want in there. A's, B's, you name it.
But you're working with when you go in there, that's what you're given, right? You're not going to reconstruct that. You're not going to reconstruct that board. So we all, even nowadays, we all work with that. We have our, as mixers, we might have if we're in the box completely, we have the allocation of plugins that we're familiar with and that we work with. Everyone's got the limitations, and the great thing for me with all this is seeing how George Martin and Jeff Emmerich solved problems for the Beatles, given their extreme limitations. They were working with Altec compressors, that modified Altec compressors. They were working with Fairchild limiters. They were working with very primitive EQs on the red consoles. In fact, what you could think of it as the equivalent of a high tone, treble and a bass control. Are the built-in EQs, which is why actually they brought they ended up bringing eventually that the curve bender into the studio for the Beatles, was to give them a little bit more discrete control over the EQ. The boards themselves, because they had such limited or the signal flow, because it was so limited, ended up that when they were using things like the Fairchild or using the Altec compressors, those were on the sends to the tape. So they couldn't put one on a guitar and put one on they could, but because they were so limited, they didn't choose that route. They would put them on the path out to the tape machine, is where they would they would insert their compression or their limiting. So that means that everything is being sent to that channel. If they're doing a whole backing track to channel 1, that one compressor is handling all of the work, or one limiter all of the work for everything that's going out to that channel. That's some limitation.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah. And it sounds as good as it sounds.
Right. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. So, yeah, that limitations that we talk about, inspires creativity, and you're being forced to commit to sounds, but by committing, committing to that. Kenny Jobson says, best Beatles ever is from Abbey Road. He says, never give me your money. I never give me your money. Da, 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 da. Well, it's part of the, what would you call that? Like the little mini rock opera, because it's got Carry Your Weight on it.
Yeah, they called it a medley.
Medley, that's right, yes.
And,
a medley.
And actually, for those who don't know, it was designed that way. They're actually if you get a chance to hear any of the bootlegs that are called the Niagara reels from Let It Be, they're talking about
those people that don't know what a Niagara was a tape machine which, even when I moved to Los Angeles in the mid-90s, was still being used by lots of production sound guys and girls to record voice, to record, commercials and movies. Yeah, very sticky tech.
Yeah. You ever get a chance to hear those? There is discussion going on between takes on those reels, where they talk about the fact that they've got all of these half-finished songs and snippets of songs, and that, well, all they really have to do is figure out a way to pull them together, and something really cool could happen. And they're talking about that during the Let It Be sessions, and that's what became the B-side of the Abbey Road album.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was, it was built that way. A number of the songs were recorded, that you think are, maybe that's an edit in the performance, were recorded together. Like I think Polythene Pam and the order's escaping me. It's escaping me. But a number of the songs that you would think were independent songs were actually recorded together, just the way that they end up on the B-side.
Right. Yeah, absolutely crazy stuff. To believe that. Let's do another giveaway. Now, we found out, I suppose this is an easier one. We've done favorite Beatles song. What is everybody's favorite Beatle album? And this is to win. This is actually to win the classic rock course. If you want to win Jerry's book, there's actually 5 copies that you can win from Rafflecopter. So look below the video, and they will be signed, unless you ask him not to. No, I'm just joking. So you're going to get 5 signed copies. So look underneath. There's a discussion about whether Chicago is the birthplace of punk. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it really depends on what you call punk. I mean, some people will say that Blue Cheer was one of the first punk bands. So you'd have to go, well, where was Blue Cheer? California. And then other people would say Iggy and the Stooges, which is Detroit, obviously via New York, but you could say Detroit. I think, as much as I love, being British and English and all my family coming from London, I know it was definitely quite refined in London, but it's definitely not a London thing. I would say, I don't know if I'd say Chicago was punk, but I would say it doesn't have punk bands. For many people that love punk, they would go with Iggy and the Stooges, maybe some Blue Cheer, definitely MC5, but MC5, again, Detroit. So, yeah. For America, most Americans, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm no expert. That's for people here. They're the experts. I'm not the expert. I would say definitely most people I know would hail Detroit as kind of the birthplace of punk. Although when I was talking to, years ago, James Williamson about this, I would say he said to me, Scott Baxendale, who I respect, who builds these beautiful guitars, is saying "Rumble" by Link Wray is the first punk song.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Link poked holes in his speakers with a pencil to get his ratty sound.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, when I said to him, I asked him about punk. This is what's so funny. So this is a guy in the Stooges, and I asked him about punk rock, and and we talked about him being the godfather of punk. And he said to me, he goes, "We weren't punk. We just weren't that good." He wanted to play. They wanted to play rock. They wanted to be in a rock band. They wanted to be the Stooges. They wanted to be, Zeppelin. They wanted to be like that, but they just weren't that good. But obviously, they created something which was amazing. His point is that they just weren't as good musicians when they first started off. Now, he obviously became great, but if the riff is, you know what I mean, and you're just playing it. You know what I mean? You're inventing a new thing. But anyway, I don't know. I certainly don't have a strong opinion on this. So what do we end up with? Everybody, did everybody name their favorite albums? We've got lots of. Phil McNally won. Hey, congratulations, Phil. What did you say, Phil? What was Phil's favorite album? Let's see if I can find it. Mine is Let It Be. I don't think it's their best album. It's my favorite album. It's the one that I connect most to for all the songs, And all of those riffs and, It's the rock album, it's every song is like that. You can play it, and you can just sort of jam along, especially that. I just had so much fun as a kid playing along with all of those Beatles songs. Just great, and thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition. I Dig a Pygmy by Charles Hawtrey and the Deaf Aids, phase 1, in which Doris gets her oats.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So what comes next after Penny Lane?
Well, let's visit the magic book. Now we're into 1967, and what comes next is A Day in the Life.
Oh dear. Well, this one's going to be a long talk.
Yeah, so that recording spanned a few months. That was January 19th through April 7th in 1967 was the work on that. From the start on that track, they knew they wanted to do something epic in the middle. The 24-bar break that ended up having those climactic orchestra swells. That was planned right from the start. They had Mal Evans, who was the Beatles roadie and assistant, road manager and assistant. He kept count as they went through that. As they, I think they land on after the second verse of the "Love to Turn You On" part. They land on like a B5 chord or something like that, and he's counting 1, 2, 3, 4. He's counting the measures out. Lennon's vocal, for his purposes, had slapback echo printed to it. Well, the slapback was also on Mal Evans's count, and so as he's counting, they were turning up the feedback on the slapback, so it just gets insane sounding of 12 that's going on as that's happening. But that was all plotted. They didn't know what they wanted to do with that middle section, but they knew they wanted something there. They knew they wanted something exciting there. So the scale of the song was in place from the start. That it would have as magnificent a conclusion as it did, I don't think anyone anticipated. But But if you've heard on Anthology, I think they have Take Two. Take Four ended up being the actual backing track, but Take Two, where people who are Beatles fans will know Lennon counts in rather than 1, 2, 3, 4. He counts in by saying "Sugar Plum Fairy, Sugar Plum Fairy" to start it. And it's just, even at that point, the song's got magic to it, right? Right from the start.
Right.
And a historically complicated recording as well. The backing track, very straightforward. I'll get to my chart here and tell you guys about it. And boy, I'll tell you, this book, there was...
How long did it take you to do this book?
Well, I started bringing this book together. All the books have been written essentially, but the editing and proofing and finished diagramming and going through. I have trusted experts on the outside that look through this too and make sure I'm not being a bonehead to as great a degree as possible.
Were you working with Ken Townsend on some of this stuff?
Ken Townsend's seen it. I didn't work directly with him. But Ken Scott, I was able to bounce some of this stuff off of.
Amazing.
But this was compiling. It was from 10 years of research. Was a solid 6 months. I mean, I did little else but promote Volume 2 and bring this together. But as far as the scale of things go, Volume 4, the one to follow, I'll probably start on that right after Christmas. And I'll be lucky if I can get that out by October.
Is that going to be the last book in the series? Is it 4?
Yeah, I'm shooting for 4, but the caveat is where it ends up with page count. Like these ones, so if you want to think about the complexity of this work, I was able to get 4 albums in the first volume in 400 pages. I was able to get the work of 3 albums into the second volume, and that's a little over 400 pages. This is 2 albums, and it's the biggest one, and it's like just shy of 440 pages for 2 albums.
Wow.
And now we're going into the White Album, which is in that era 36 songs. Let It Be, a fairly compact recording. Abbey Road, a fairly compact recording. So I think my breaking point is if it breaks 600 pages, I'll probably do a Volume 5. But I'd love to get
so a volume.
I'd love to deliver a complete one.
So what would this last one be? You're saying it's going to be the White Album, Abbey Road, and Let It Be?
Yeah, exactly. That's the plan.
Between that and see, I would have thought Revolver on its own could have been a whole book. That's how important it was.
It is important, but the work on Revolver was almost as compact as any other album they did. It wasn't the level of complexity in the recording and conversely then the number of sessions that they needed to use to build the songs, it wasn't that high. Now we get into Magical Mystery Tour, and there's 4 solid months of sessions. Almost day in and day out, because they're not touring, they're not doing anything else now. They're just in the studio working on this. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the books, the kind of the components of the books are, there's a narration of the song from first take to every song in the period, from first take to final remix, telling you how it went from take 1 all the way through the building of the song out to the mixed version that you hear. There's a diagram.
So Jerry, your picture has frozen.
Oh, sorry. Let me restart.
The camera, you have to restart again.
Yeah. Am I back? And
you're back. Yay! Okay. Jerry has unfrozen.
I learned that trick on my own. first take to final remix in terms of a description of that process. Then at the end of that, there is a diagram of the 4-track recording process that walks you through every milestone. So if the backing track, in this case, A Day in the Life, is take 4, I show you the state of the song at take 4. I show you the overdubs that happen to take 4 to take you to the next state of the song. There's that, and then there's every single session that went into the song, and every bit of work that was done in the studio, everyone who did the work, all of the studio gear that was in place, so tape machines, mixing consoles, outboard gear, microphones, guitars, amplifiers, keyboards, to like the nth degree. Like if you want to know what speaker was in the 1963 Vox A6 C or A30/6, I got it for you. So it's that granular. 4 months of that for this book. Well, now we get into 33 songs of the White Album. We get into 15 songs of the Let It Be era. We get into 18 or 19 songs of Abbey Road. There's a lot of work.
That's amazing.
a lot of work ahead.
Hey, everybody, we've got 160 likes, and there's nearly 300 people watching. So can you please hit that like button? That would be really fantastic. Please share. We're going to do another giveaway, but this one's going to be a bit of a whopping one. We're going to give away the Classic Rock course and also a free year's membership. And if you haven't already, yeah. And so a 3 years membership. And Jerry comes in there and talks to you not one-on-one, but yesterday we talked to just Academy members only. So you get a little bit more special attention. So if you're not already an Academy member, lots of you already are. But you can check that out as well. 250 people watching. Let's get 250 likes. 254, going up all the time, 257. If we can get all of those to be likes, that would be absolutely stupendous. And my question would be, so we did favorite album, favorite song. Here's a silly one. Here's a silly one. What would be the next favorite for Beatles? Who's your favorite Beatle? And if you've got a why, let us know why. I'd
have him do Who's Your Favorite Fifth Beatle?
Oh, but then that takes...
That takes some knowledge. Never mind.
Not everybody knows who Brian Epstein is. Not everybody knows who George Martin is. Not everybody knows Jeff Emmerich. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say Jeff Emmerich, George Martin, Brian Epstein. You know, so yeah, who is your favorite? If you haven't liked, please hit the like button and let us know who. So Rob said Yoko. Yay!
Okay, actually,
Peter's John Lennon. George, Lennon, Paul, Ringo, Paul, Jimmy Nicol, John, George.
Let's return to a tangent here on Let It Be, or not, right. on Hey Jude.
Let's let everybody answer this. Let's let all these questions come in before we choose some. And please hit that like button as well. Please, please, please. Lemmica says none of them. Whoa, Pete Best says Trevor. Woo! Richard Starkey. But anyway, carry on.
Yoko and Linda McCartney, they obviously get a lot of bad press, and there's a lot of negative feeling toward both of them.
There was a little bit of a discussion going on about that earlier in the chat, which I ignored, about Yoko and Linda. Yeah. Well,
and here's what I would always keep in mind, and what I tend to share with people that ever diss either of them, is that Hey Jude would not sound like Hey Jude without them, because they both sing backing vocals on it.
Well, there you go.
So if you like Hey Jude, you like the work of Linda McCartney and the work of Yoko Ono.
Right.
So get over it.
Yeah. Well, look. I'm married. I love my wife. I have kids with her. It's like, my point is when you love a woman and you're in love, it's, you know what I mean? It's like that's what motivates you. You know, we have kids together. I love my kids. It's like, and she drives me. She drives me nuts at times. I drive her nuts probably equally, and if not more. But, you know, it's Magic Alex, says Bob. Nice one. Stu
Magic
Sutcliffe, I've got.
Alex. That's a good one.
Mike Waldron said Linda's Tambourine. We've got some George Martins. Eric Idle from the Rattles. Giles Martin, Paul McCartney. And Jet, I thought was a major lady suffragette. Oh, there you go. Ken says Ringo was actually the fifth Beatle because Pete Best would have been the fourth.
There you go. That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, there you go. Hey Dude, says Roxverse. Oh yeah, and Scott says, you know, love influenced them creatively. Yeah, of course. Yep. Being in love, my husband would not want me to write software with him. Right, I understand. That's what happens, Lisa. Sheila says they're equally nuts. Yes, exactly. Audio Bithrow. I tried to speculate Yoko's solo work. I bought one of the 2 Yoko box sets ever sold. Actually, you know, I have friends that love Yoko's songs on Double Fantasy, and my friend, obviously my good friend Jack Douglas, made that album. So Eric was the 7th or 8th Beatle.
Every man has a woman who loves them. That's a great track. You're my angel from Double Fantasy. You're my angel that she did. That's a brilliant song.
I mean, it inspired John to write "Woman." I can hardly express my. It was a great song. Adam says he walked past Yoko in Central Park but had to hold himself back for saying thanks for breaking up the Beatles. Okay.
Very, very wise of you.
Very wise, yes. And Mark Becker won. And Mark Becker's said George. I think George is one of the ones that everybody secretly loves because everybody secretly loves George because he was sort of the quieter Beatle. He was the youngest Beatle. I mean, he was still a teenager when they got signed. Everybody knows that he couldn't play in Hamburg. They got ejected because he was still only 17 years old. He wasn't even old enough to go into the bars. I
have a George story for you. I have a George story for everybody. Tell us
the George story.
It's included in the book. Danny Harrison. Book number 3. Danny Harrison, his son. Has just graduated from college, and he's 23 years old, and he's saying, "Dad, look at me. I'm a college graduate, 23 years old." And George Harrison goes, 23, wow, what was I doing at 23? And thinks about it for a second. He goes, oh yeah, Sgt. Pepper. So there's that.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. Jeff Emmerich is engineering, Grammy Award-winning engineer for Sgt. Pepper. He's 20 years old.
Yeah, I know. He was 19 when he started Revolver, wasn't he?
Yeah, 19 on Revolver, 20 on Pepper. I mean,
they were kids. What I like about that, actually, there's a bigger message there because I don't want to get caught up in thinking that the age is important because what I mean by that is it means that you can be creative at any point in your life. It's not a superior thing of like, oh my God, they were geniuses because they were 20 and 23 years old. No, what it means is if you've got the creativity and the drive, that's what you need. You need the creativity and the drive more than anything else, that love and that desire of music. If you're 65 years old and you want to write an album, go write an album. Go and write and record an album because the difference is just putting your time, your energy, your ethic, and everything into it. Age really is just a number. That's the bigger message from that. So when I talk about that, also I talk about it from a perspective because there's a sort of illusion that I don't like, and I don't want to be part of this problem because I've been doing this for 20, 30 years now, and I've amassed all of this equipment over working my ass off for 20 or 30 years. But the reality is that you could go and sit in a room with somebody you've never heard of who picks up an acoustic guitar or opens a laptop and write an absolutely amazing song. Amazing songs don't always come from you know, guys or girls that have been doing it for 50 years. They come from all kinds of different areas. You know, it's really is a huge deal that, you know, it's really a huge, the reality is, and the message is that if you want to do music, you can do it at any time. It's not about age, it's the opposite. That's what teaches me.
Yeah, and we're so lucky. We live in a democratized era as far as creativity goes as well. You know, the tools to bring your songs to life are in some, you know, there are free DAWs out there. If you're into recording, you have to pay a penny for them. You can build, you can build a functional studio for a few $100s if that's the route that the only route for you to get there. If you can't do it, your friend probably has one, and yeah, and the wonderful thing about art, period, it knows no age. There's no point where you can't get in. There's no point where you can't contribute. There's no point where you can't make something special. It really does come down to, do you have the commitment to put your energies and your creativity to work and see it through, and actually not dream about building something, but build something.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely crazy. I agree. Although somebody says it's fake, it's amazing how we get these crazy trolls on here. This is like somebody comes out of nowhere. You know, the reality is, it's like this is the thing. It's like we have an amazing community here of people that are here to support each other, and it's such a beautiful thing, because I think this is the beautiful thing of music. It's like, I'm dying to hear a new Peter Gabriel record. I'm dying to hear, you know, what Kate Bush did if she could go back in the studio. Jazz artists. There's so many great artists. But then I'm also excited to hear, you know, young upcoming artists as well. To me, music is music, and everybody has got something to say. U2's last album in particular really spoke to me, because they're adults with kids. Some of their kids are having kids. You know what I mean? It's like they're getting older, and they're now singing from a different place. It's just as valid as when they were 19, and that's the beautiful thing about being truly creative. And I hope that if there's one thing we can do with all of these conversations, is look at the Beatles, look at what they were doing with now what we would consider to be massively limited resources, whether it be live recording on 2 tracks on their first album, you know, just basically just putting it down, everybody live in a studio, 17 hours, bada boom, bada bing, record the whole album, you know, up to working on a whopping 8 tracks, whatever it is. It was always limited in what they could do with overdubs. There was no plugins. There was no way. Yes, they could reverse things, slow them down, speed them up. They could do all these kind of things, but it was so limited to what we have now. So it is a lesson for us, is that human beings can do this. We can do this. We can make great music. Like you and I were talking about yesterday in the Academy, Beethoven had no way to hear his music recorded. All he could do was write it down. And he couldn't even hear it played back by the end of his career. He was stone deaf. So nothing to hold us back. And let's really, you know, really help each other. Really, it's wonderful. Yeah, we're really a beautiful place. Okay, is there any last questions for Jerry before we go? Anybody got any last questions? Help me to have a backing of a record label. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, none of our competitions are ever a scam. Everybody always notes it. But, you know, it's crazy. YouTube told me that some of these are other people's channels. Isn't that crazy? Just to try and throw a spanner in the works. Couldn't believe it. But anyway, so
everyone has always gotten the giveaways that we've been participating in.
Oh, yeah, everyone's always got them. And people send in photos. And there's even a giveaway page. So you can go and see everybody's won it. But what was I going to say? Which one of the 4 was more into? Oh, here you go. It's a good question. Of all the members of the Beatles, who do you think was the most into getting into the mixing? Who maybe would sit there at the end? Any of them? All of them? None of them?
Well, McCartney was the most active of all of the Beatles in relation to the recording process. He was the one who was interested in it, and he was the one who spent the most time learning about it and participating when there would be mixes to sit in on. And ultimately, like toward the White Album period, they started getting their hands on the board, for better or for worse. They talk about how their solution to everything was like full bass and full treble on everything. They just wanted more of everything. But McCartney was easily the most active of all of the Beatles in the studio.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I think even to this day, that was what we would have seen. He's obviously continued the legacy in a really beautiful way. He
still makes cool music.
Rob says we should do another one just for the questions alone. Which Beatle was stoked out on the most gear? I've heard that actually somewhere unimpressed with the hybrid tube UL amps Vox supplied them. Yeah, I think that did they even use? They only used the kind of hybrid stuff in America. I think in England they were Voxes and Fender amps almost exclusively. I could see in the studio stuff, but when they got to America, those Super Beatles and stuff were probably just for the touring stuff. But did they even really get to use those?
No. They didn't use the Super Beatles. The Super Beatles were a commercialization of the AC100s, and actually they were a hyped up AC100. I think the Super Beatles are 125s.
Right.
So they never played through a Super Beatle. They worked with JMI Vox in the UK, and once Vox got the relationship going, they were feeding the Beatles prototypes of amps that sometimes got built and sometimes didn't. Some of the Pepper era and Revolver era amps, the 4125s and 7125s, only a handful of those were ever made. The UL 750s and 450s, only a handful of those ever got manufactured, but they were in use. They were in use by the Beatles. And then Fender came knocking from the USA, and the Beatles loved US stuff. They loved the Rickenbackers. So when Fender came and dropped some gear on them, they're happy to use that too, and they ended up using on a number of recordings, especially post Revolver, have Showmans on them, have twin reverbs on them, Fender Deluxes. So
apparently Chuck Norris uses Lewitt microphones. Well, that's good. So what are the UL amps? What do they mean by the ULs?
Just a model designation. What that's specifically related to escapes me, if anything, other than a model designation, or a unique designation for them. But they were they were always given kind of like the cutting edge of what was coming out of Vox. And now whether Vox decided it was made sense for them to then build the units and send them into the marketplace or not, that was another decision. But they were using like some of the high wattage ones, the AC100s, and that. Those were touring amps. They tried to bring them into the studio, and the EMI engineers were like, we don't need a 100-watt amplifier to record your guitar. Those AC30s and the 50s will do just fine, thank you. So you can leave those ones behind.
Wow. Lots of people talking about the AC15. That is one of my favorite amps. If you've got an AC15, You're doing very well. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Please, if you haven't already, hit the like button. Please subscribe. You can go to producelikeapro.com. Jerry has actually done this inside of the Academy. And so we have you can ask him questions there. We'll do another one, I'm sure. Maybe we can do another one sooner rather than later, Jerry. People love this stuff.
Yep, I'm always happy to participate with the Academy. I learn a lot from it myself, and I've been doing this for a few years, but there's always something more to learn. Whenever I hear something that like opens up my mind, I'm like, I don't know anything.
Do we have a new blog from you as well on our site?
You'll be getting one within a couple of weeks.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you'll be getting one within a couple of weeks. But there are a couple of blog posts there talking about one of them talking about Beatles miking techniques for drums, and yes, so check it out.
If Matt can probably put those up as well. Thank you, everyone that participated. Very, very excited to have you all here. To all the Academy members, please go and check out yesterday's one as well. We talked about a lot of the same stuff as well. And Ty said he found out about Jerry because of Produce Like a Pro. Absolutely. That's everybody's saying thank you, Jerry. Nice session, Jerry and Warren. Thank you, Mr. Hammack and Warren. Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, guys. Bye. Wonderful. It's been absolutely marvelous. Thank you for having for letting us have you on the show again. Excited to do more. And
thanks. Yep, I appreciate the opportunity. Check out Jerry's book.
Go down there. There's links to win it. You can win one of 5 copies signed. Go check out down below. Click the link. Down there. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, everybody. And we'll see you all again very, very soon.